The comments by Boris Johnson and indeed England's Football Association, they've condemned racist abuse of players, and so they should. The question is, what do we do about it? Joining me now, John Barnes, former England footballer. John, good morning to you.
Good morning.
I find it absolutely staggering that here we are in this day and age. We've been talking about racism in football for as long as I can remember, and yet we still haven't tackled it. It's an abomination, isn't it? What can we do?
We can get rid of it in society first. You cannot get rid of racism in football as long as it exists in society, because football is a part of society. So unfortunately, we do it in the wrong way around. We're looking to throw before these racist football fans, as people like to call them, who are they? Are they doctors, lawyers, milkmen, postmen? Why don't we look at those institutions and say, you have racist members in your institutions? Why is it football? This is the problem we have. We throw it at football's door rather than looking at society as a whole, and that's what we have to do. Because the Euros comes around every 2 years, the World Cup, the football matches once a week. What is happening in society every single day? Through jobs, employment, education, that we're not tackling. We're just blaming football.
And so I suppose from your standpoint, what you're saying is, look, it's manifested in, of course it's going to happen. If we haven't stamped it out of society, then of course it's going to happen. Okay, so how do
What about the police? Now we're talking about it to the police. And there are no black managers of big institutions. So is it just football? Do we not look around and see the world that we live in? But we absolve ourselves of responsibility and tackling the real problem by looking at it from a footballing perspective and say, oh, let's just tackle it in football and all will be well.
But then on the other hand, I mean, we've also got a situation where if you start through positive discrimination of trying to put people in positions of power, rather than perhaps even going right back into, you've got to go back into education, you've got to go back into society, you've got to go back into all sorts of social problems. It's such a complex area. Where would you start? I mean, would you start by positive discrimination, saying, right, we've got to have people who are role models? Or
well, first of all, you can't pass laws. Positive discrimination has been around for a long time. You can't pass laws to make people not racist. Laws have been around to stop people stealing for thousands of years, but they still do it. You have to change the perception that we all have about black people, about women, about gay people. You cannot look, laws can't change the thing, because there are always ways around those laws. And it starts by looking at ourselves. So rather than pointing the finger at the ones who get caught, if me and you are watching a football match and a female and a male line referee comes out, who do we think is the best before we know their ability? You won't say the male because you're going to get cancelled or sacked. But I'm quite comfortable in saying that because of what life has wrongly shown me about women's ability to referee a football match. So don't blame me. Blame the environment I brought up to make me think that way. So unfortunately, people get caught, and people who think the exact same thing. You think the football fan who says, oh, that line woman is rubbish, is the only one. He's the only one who's got caught. And this is why I have to challenge the unconscious bias, which apparently doesn't exist, or the implicit bias that goes on, not the overt bias of an idiot throwing a banana on the field or racial abusing somebody on social media. That is not what's stopping black people, women or gay people from maximizing their potential.
What do you make of taking the knee? Do you think that was a helpful standpoint, or do you think that it was retrograde?
They can take a knee, they cannot take a knee. Wilfred Zaha doesn't want to take a knee, fine. Some people want to take a knee, fine. Here we are 18 months later, not talking about why they're taking the knee. We're talking about whether they have the right to take the knee or not. Why don't we start that discussion and start the discussion about why are they taking the knee? Because of the injustice, not just George Floyd, but towards black people, towards women, towards gay people generally. And let's tackle that issue. But we're not. We're tackling the issue now as to whether someone has a right to take a knee or not.
And what are the things that we then need to do? Because if we've got these views in society, and as you say, because people grow up and they see certain people in certain roles, because they see or hear certain views or comments, then it starts to condition them. Then to me, that means that you have to go right back into school. But then if you're not teaching people the right things in school, then you're never going to get this right.
Well, people talk about education. What education are we learning? We're learning how great Britain was in terms of everything that it actually has and it's achieved. Based on what? How did Britain become great? We know how it became great. So, of course, when you talk about education, that is part of the education, telling the truth about history, about who we are in relation to other people. And that is why we feel superior, because life has wrongly shown us in Britain that we are better than everybody else. But we're not. We're just like anybody else.
But you see, here's the thing, though, that you're talking about football, that where you're trying to win a match where you are trying to say that you're better than anybody else, because winning, that's part of the human psyche. And in the same way that there are some things that were invented in this country that did have an incredible influence, say, for example, like the Industrial Revolution, that changed the way that we worked.
Furnished by what? What was it furnished by? slavery and getting products from all around the world? How do we get those products to furnish the Industrial Revolution? Is that taught?
Well, it's part of it, and certainly when I was taught, that was part of it, and it's.
Oh,
so
you were taught about the 18 inches of under the hull for where these black slaves were taken to the Caribbean to get the sugar to come back to furnish the Industrial Revolution. You were taught about that, about the slave ships and the Middle Passage.
Well,
I wasn't. I went to school in England.
Okay, well,
I was to talk about the horrors of Africa, Indonesia, and all of these countries where Britain colonized and then were mistreated those people. So the point I'm making, let's not go back in history. However, let us learn from it.
Well, you learn from it, but also if you start to paint this country in a bad light in every respect, then that's just as bad as not teaching it at all, isn't it?
Absolutely. So why don't we be more balanced? But when are we ever taught a balanced history of ourselves here? And this is why people feel superior, because they don't know the truth.
But then they don't know the truth. But then you see. But then also, don't we need to tell the story that, say, for example, I mean, when all of that stuff was going on, people accused me of being posh and this and that. But my family wasn't even here. They weren't even in this country. They were living elsewhere under oppression. So
it happens.
So exactly.
But we like to point the finger at other people who live under oppression, but not ourselves. We want to talk about the oppressive communist regime. We want to talk about the oppressive Saudi Arabian regime. But we don't talk about the oppression that we instilled on the majority of the world. We don't talk about that. But then
that is history, and we also dismantled that. So if you want to spend too much time talking about the history, then you're not going to talk about the today and the now, are you?
We haven't dismantled it. Have we talked about Winston Churchill's wanted to have the slogan of Tory, keep England white? That's what he wanted, keep England white. Winston Churchill wanted that slogan, but the Tory party said no. Are we talking about that? Are we talking about what he actually did in the north? Are we talking about what happened in the Sudan? We're not. We learn the great things about what we've done, which is fine, and we have done. So therefore, I'm not going back in history to then say how terrible everything was, because I live here and I'm part of this. However, we have to be balanced, because when we're not balanced, what we then assume is that everybody else around the world, from their communists or from their Muslims or from
people might hear, but people might hear what you're saying, and they're saying, but that's not balanced either, because you've got
No. I'm always balanced. I'm trying to redress the balance. So I say Winston Churchill did a great thing. He was a great man in wartime. But we're always talking about how great we are. So in trying to redress the balance, we'll say, hang on a second. Yes, Britain is great. A little country doing what it did, but how did it did what it did? So what I'm saying is that the legacy of that, the legacy of what we've done, is creating an environment here now where people feel superior because of what we have told them about what we have done. And we also blame other countries, other communist societies, Saudi Arabia, and for human rights, when we were exactly the same.
I'm not going to be a Churchill apologist, but so in 1955, when Churchill expressed his support for the slogan "Keep Britain White" with regards to immigration from the West Indies,
he didn't suppress the he wanted to. He didn't support it. He wanted it.
Okay, well, whether he wanted it or supported it, I don't know. I wasn't there, but aren't we looking at part of the problem when we talk about immigration, and we talk about immigration? It's not just about colour; it's also about how different people have come to this nation. And look, I'm part of this because my lot came over, over a century ago, and there was quite a lot of resistance then. That when we talk about immigration, what we're really saying is we have a culture, and if you ask too many people to come to a country, no matter where they come from, it is going to have an impact, and if you don't prepare for that, then that's going to create social and domestic problems, and that's kind of what he was alluding to, as opposed to saying keep England white, which is
too many people in 1955. There weren't too many people coming in 1955. You're not talking about the immigration that's going on now, and you're talking about lots of people from war-torn countries, which Britain helped to create these war-torn countries and the problems around. But however, that's a different subject. In 1955, these were people who fought for Britain in the war, who wanted to come here, the Windrush generation, people like that. And he wanted to keep England white. He didn't say stop Germans coming, did he? They're white, Swedish. So he didn't want to stop immigration. He wanted to stop immigration of a certain group of people.
Do you think by understanding this history or going back, it really helps us going forward, though?
I'll tell you why it does, because then it gives us, because what has happened is we have a perception of ourselves here in Britain, because Britain have always been the moral guardians of the world, but we haven't. If we know the truth, and we're more balanced about it, and why I'm like this, and a lot of people are like this, because for too long we have been told, we have whitewashed how great we are in terms from a moral and intellectual point of view. Therefore, if we're more balanced, we will then see that we're no different to the Germans, or the Italians, or the French, or the Africans. We're all the same.
But you know what? No, but the thing is, though,
because of what we've been told.
But the thing is, though, you see, I'm sorry, but I don't think we are the same as them.
Of course you don't. Why do you think England is the most hated country in Europe? Why do you think everybody wants England?
It isn't the most hated country in Europe.
It isn't? It isn't?
Well, we
I've
did
travelled all over
leave.
Europe.
We did
Take it from
leave.
me.
We did leave the European Union because we've taken our money away because we don't want to be part of.
I never mentioned the European Union. I said the most hated country in England. Do you think the Europe are cheering for Italy or England? The rest of Europe.
I think
And of course, in the Eurovision Song Contest, which is just a bit of a laugh and a joke. Why do you think that is? Because Europe believes that we have a supercilious attitude. And are they all wrong?
I think they are.
Oh, of course you would. Of course you would.
Why
you look
would
at the
I?
behaviour of someone. Why? Who else boos national anthems from other countries?
Quite a lot of people, actually.
Yeah, but I didn't. Well, I'm the Euros here. I didn't hear anybody else booing it.
No. Well, that's
Who else tried to break into the stadium at the final? Who else abuses? And have you seen what happened last night with all the fighting?
yes. It's disgusting.
All right, okay.
The fighting is
that's a
disgusting. The fighting is disgusting. The abuse on social and digital media is disgusting. The racism is disgusting, and I agree with you on all of those. However, I do think that having pride in your nation and whether you feel superior to others is a very moot point, because isn't it important to feel pride in your nation?
Absolutely. Feel pride in your nation, but racially abuse the black ones who are in your nation when they're not successful. What about pride in a nation for Sacco, who is a 19-year-old boy who took a penalty? Why not have pride in that instead of racially abusing him? Or
I agree with you on that. I don't want to see him racially abused. I think his performance was incredible.
Pride in the nation comes across when you have the transactional benefit of black people being successful. Linford Christie, Frank Bruno, when they're actually doing things, we love them. But of course, we have no use of them when they're finished, do we?
Just finally, though, I mean, do you not think that Britain should be proud of its history when we were the only country in the world to ban slavery at the time?
And why did they ban slavery? And they transported more slaves than anybody else. When it became financially viable, not viable anymore, and they wanted to stop it for many different reasons. So don't pat yourselves on the back about banning slavery.
Well, I wasn't here then, so
I'll sit down and tell you about why they banned slavery, which had nothing to do with feeling they didn't feel black people were ever equal. Wilberforce, none of them. So as much as they wanted to ban slavery, that was for economic reasons. The Industrial Revolution took over, where they didn't need slavery anymore, which we can sit down and talk about. But it's something, this is what I'm talking about. The perception you have based on what you've been taught, that gives you that feeling of, we banned slavery. Never mind, we are the ones who transported more slaves than anybody else. And we wanted to stop people.
But the thing is, though, that you weren't around at the time, and neither was I. My family weren't even in this country. And you're asking me to feel guilt for what people did in the past? I want to hear about it.
I'm not asking you to feel guilt. I'm asking you to understand why you feel superior, because you just made a comment, we banned slavery, so therefore we're better than everybody else. And that's not true.
I don't feel superior.
So why throughout the line we banned slavery and nobody else did? We're the first to do it.
Well, yeah, look, it's a long conversation, and I guess, much as I would like to stay and discuss it some more. John, listen, you've opened our minds to all sorts of things, and indeed, the phone lines, they'll be open as well. We'll take some comments on all of this coming up here on Talk Radio. John Barnes, former England footballer, thank you very much indeed for certainly giving us your thoughts on the match last night, and indeed some of the racism that has taken place and your condemning of it. 0344 499 1000 is the number. We'll take your calls next. First